The day I rolled my Navy patrol boat back into the neighborhood, the whole street paused. Kids pointed, a few neighbors waved, and a couple even walked over to welcome me home from deployment. The boat wasn't huge, just a compact riverine patrol craft, fully registered, secured on a trailer, and legally parked on the gravel pad beside my house. It felt good to finally be home, finally sleep in my own bed, and finally enjoy the peace I'd earned. But peace wasn't something my HOA president, Karen, believed in. Not when she saw a chance to stir drama. I noticed her almost immediately, standing across the street with her hands on her hips, sunglasses pushed up like a shield of authority. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just stared at the boat like it was some kind of biohazard. As I walked past her to grab a wrench from the truck bed, she cleared her throat and said, "That vessel cannot stay here. This is a residential community, not a naval base." I explained calmly that it was legal, registered, and on my property. She muttered something about neighborhood standards, and strutted away with her clipboard bouncing against her side. The next morning, I stepped outside to find a bright neon orange violation sticker slapped across the hull, big, bold text reading, "Abandoned vessel, remove immediately." Karen wasn't even subtle. The sticker covered almost half the side of the boat. My jaw clenched. And there she was, standing at the end of her driveway, sipping coffee and watching me like she expected applause. I peeled the corner of the sticker and saw it left glue residue on federal equipment. My patience thinned real fast. I walked over to her and said, "Karen, this isn't just a boat. This is federal military property. You can't tag it like a trash car." She rolled her eyes so hard I swear she saw her own brain. "Federal, schmederal," she snapped. "The HOA rules apply to everyone. Remove it before I escalate this." Then she waved her hand and walked inside, confident she had the upper hand. That was her second mistake. The first was touching the boat at all. I took photos of the sticker, the damage to the paint, and the way she had placed it, then documented everything for my unit. I didn't want conflict, but I wasn't about to let someone, especially an HOA president, tamper with government property like it was an overgrown weed. I had no idea that this tiny orange sticker would turn into one of the biggest HOA meltdowns the neighborhood had ever seen. But the war had already begun, and Karen had no clue she had just picked a fight with federal law. The very next afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. As I turned onto my street, something felt off. A large white tow truck was reversing into my driveway, its winch already lowering toward the trailer hitch. My heart rate spiked. Standing proudly beside it was Karen, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, and that smug, tight-lipped smile she wore whenever she thought she'd won. For a moment, I genuinely wondered if she had completely lost her mind. She wasn't just doubling down, she was going for the nuclear option. I pulled over hard and jumped out of my truck, yelling, "Stop! Don't touch that boat!" The tow driver braked instantly and looked between us, confused. She said this was abandoned property," he muttered, pointing at Karen. She stepped forward like she was delivering a presidential address. "This vessel violates community guidelines. It is being removed at the expense of the homeowner." The confidence in her voice was unreal. She truly believed HOA rules outweighed federal jurisdiction. I walked closer, staring her down. "Karen, this is military equipment. Interfering with it is a federal offense. You can't tow it. He can't tow it. Nobody can tow it." The tow driver swallowed hard. He looked at the boat again, really looked, and suddenly stepped back from the winch like it was radioactive. "Ma'am," he said to Karen cautiously, "I'm not touching military property. I'm not losing my license for your neighborhood drama." Karen's face twisted. She marched toward him waving her clipboard like a weapon. "Do your job. I called you. The HOA has authority here." It was almost painful to watch. She had no idea how wrong she was. I stepped between them and pointed toward the street. "Driver, you should go. Right now." The guy didn't need encouragement. He climbed into the tow truck and left so quickly he nearly ran over her decorative garden gnome. Karen watched him flee, stunned. Slowly, she turned toward me, her anger rising like a thermometer in the sun. "You're obstructing an HOA enforcement action," she snapped. "I'll be filing another violation, and trust me, you won't win this." I didn't respond. I just pulled out my phone, took photos, and recorded the time. She tried to snatch the clipboard back into her control, but the moment had already passed. She had attempted to remove federal property, after being explicitly warned. And now, with her tow stunt documented, I had everything I needed. As she retreated toward her front door, still muttering about community rules, I sent the evidence to my unit security office. I wasn't trying to escalate, but she wasn't giving me a choice. And unknowingly, Karen had just triggered a response she would never be prepared for. The following morning started off strangely quiet. Karen's house, normally buzzing with her stomping around in sandals and barking orders at neighbors, felt unusually still. Maybe she sensed something coming. Maybe she didn't. But I knew what was coming, because 30 minutes after sunrise, a dark Navy security vehicle turned onto our street, followed by a second one. The neighbors peeked through blinds like it was a parade they weren't sure they should be watching. When the two military police officers stepped out in uniform, calm and professional, the whole neighborhood froze. I walked out to greet them, and they saluted lightly before approaching the boat. One officer inspected the hull, running his hand over the dried adhesive left by Karen's violation sticker. The other reviewed the pictures I had taken. "You did the right thing reporting this," he said quietly. "Tampering with federal equipment, attempted unauthorized removal. This is serious." Before I could respond, the front door across the street swung open so hard it nearly rebounded off the wall. Out stormed Karen, hair frizzed, robe still tied crooked, but her attitude still fully charged. She marched straight toward the officers, shouting from halfway down her driveway, "You can't just show up here without notifying the HOA first. This community has procedures." Both MPs turned to her slowly, the way professionals do when they're assessing a threat that doesn't realize it's a threat. The lead officer held up a hand, calm but firm. "Ma'am, we are conducting an investigation regarding interference with military property." Karen froze mid-stride. Her mouth hung open like a malfunctioning garage door. "Investigation? Of what?" she demanded. The officer pointed at the patrol boat. "This vessel. We have documentation showing an HOA official attempted to mark, deface, and tow federal equipment." Karen's face went pale, then red, then pale again, like a glitching traffic light. I didn't know it was federal," she protested, jabbing a finger at me. "He didn't put any special sign on it. How was I supposed to know?" The MP remained unmoved. "He verbally informed you," he said. "And tampering after a verbal warning still qualifies." By now, neighbors had gathered in small clusters. Some pretended to water plants, others pretended to check the mail twice. Everyone knew what was happening, and everyone wanted to witness it. Karen's voice dropped to a shaky whisper. Are you saying I could get in trouble?" The MP stepped closer. "Ma'am, we're saying you already are. We need to speak with the HOA board immediately." Watching Karen stand there speechless, clutching her clipboard like a life preserver, was the first time I'd ever seen her lose control. She had started a war she never understood, and now the military was involved. And this was only the beginning of the fallout. Karen must have sprinted faster than she ever had in her life, because within 10 minutes she had gathered 3 members of the HOA board in her living room for an emergency situation. I know this because they all walked out together, faces tense, whispers sharp, eyes bouncing between me, the military police, and the patrol boat like they were witnessing a hostage negotiation. The board president, Mr. Dawson, approached the MPs with a polite, nervous smile. "Officers, surely there's a misunderstanding," he said. "We don't want any trouble here." His voice cracked on the word, trouble, which told me he already knew they had plenty. The lead MP handed him the printed documentation they brought. My photos, timestamps, incident report, and the official statements confirming the boat was federal military property. As Dawson flipped through the pages, his expression shifted from concern, to disbelief, to horror. Karen stood behind him, arms crossed, trying to look composed, but there was a tremble she couldn't hide. "Karen," Dawson finally said, "please tell me you didn't authorize a tow truck." Karen stammered, It was blocking the community aesthetic. I thought it was allowed." The board members stared at her as if she had just admitted to burning down the clubhouse. One of the MPs stepped forward. "The attempted removal of a federal asset, especially after warning, can qualify as interference with military property. That includes civil liability and, potentially, criminal penalties. The word penalties hit the group like a thunderclap. One of the board members, a tall man named Reed, who had always been neutral, took a step away from Karen as if distance might save him. Another whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Karen's face contorted into a mix of fear and indignation. "You can't hold me responsible," she snapped. "I was acting on behalf of the HOA." Dawson slowly turned toward her, eyes wide. "Not anymore," he muttered. "We never approved any of this." She opened her mouth to protest, but he cut her off. "You acted alone. You exceeded your authority. And you may have just put the entire HOA at risk of a federal investigation." The look on Karen's face shifted again, this time to something like betrayal. She glanced at each board member, but none were willing to share the sinking ship with her. Suddenly, the clipboard that had always been her badge of power looked more like an anchor pulling her underwater. The MPs, keeping everything professional, announced they needed a formal statement from the board and would be filing a report with Base Legal. The board nodded shakily, scrambling to cooperate. Karen, however, looked completely deflated, her confidence evaporated, her voice gone, her control shattered. She stood alone on her porch, hugging the clipboard against her chest like it could protect her from the consequences she had brought upon herself. The HOA had always backed her, until now. And for the first time, she realized she was no longer the one in charge of this neighborhood. Federal law was, and she had no defense against it. The fallout didn't take long. Within 48 hours, the HOA scheduled a special meeting, not in someone's living room this time, but in the community clubhouse, where things felt more official and more ominous. Word had spread fast. Nearly every homeowner showed up, whispering in tight circles, glancing at me, glancing at the boat, and mostly glancing at Karen, who sat stiffly in the front row clutching her clipboard like a shield. The room buzzed with a mix of curiosity, anger, and a little excitement. People love a spectacle, especially when it doesn't involve them. When the meeting began, HOA President Dawson cleared his throat and addressed the room. "We have received formal communication from military authorities regarding an incident involving federal property." The crowd murmured. Karen shrank in her seat. Dawson continued, each word sounding heavier than the last. "It has been determined that actions taken by a member of this board were unauthorized, potentially unlawful, and put the HOA at serious legal risk." He didn't say Karen's name, but he didn't have to. Every head turned toward her in perfect unison. Karen's attempt at defending herself was painful. She stood up, voice trembling, insisting she acted for the good of the community and didn't know the boat was federal. But the moment she said, "He didn't put a sign on it," the room erupted in gasps and whispers. One neighbor even muttered, "You don't need a sign to know not to tow a military boat, Karen." Another added, louder, "You were warned." The MPs had already provided a clear statement documenting the warnings she ignored. She had no escape. No technical loophole. No HOA rule to hide behind. Then came the vote. A formal motion to remove Karen from the HOA board immediately passed almost unanimously. Only one person voted against it, Karen herself. She sat back down, stunned, as if she couldn't comprehend the reality unfolding around her. For someone who had ruled the neighborhood with fear, fines, and condescending smiles, the silence around her now felt colder than any punishment. The clipboard she had weaponized for years finally rested uselessly in her lap. After the meeting, Dawson and two board members approached me outside. They apologized, genuinely. Not the usual tight-lipped HOA kind, but the real kind that comes from people who know they almost stepped into federal quicksand. "We're grateful you handled this the right way," Dawson said. "And we're grateful you warned her. She just didn't listen." I nodded. I didn't need revenge, just peace. But peace came with an unexpected perk. They formally approved my placing a small metal sign beside the boat, "Federal property, do not tamper." It wasn't necessary, but it felt poetic. A week later, while I was checking the boat straps, Karen walked by slowly. Not storming. Not glaring. Just quiet. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but before she could, my neighbor from across the street stepped out onto his porch and called, "Karen, don't get any closer." 20 feet from the boat. Federal rules. She froze. I couldn't help the small smile that formed. She turned red, spun around, and hurried back to her house without another word. And just like that, the neighborhood finally felt peaceful, because for the first time ever, Karen had learned there were rules even she couldn't break. Federal rules.